Hello, world. I'm Jack, and welcome to English Speaking Studio.
I'm Lucy. So, what are you waiting for? Let's dive in and make learning English an unforgettable journey.
Hey everyone, welcome back. So today we're going to be diving into something super important, and that's figuring out the right level of care for depression.
Yeah. When we think about depression, it can be a really personal and sometimes overwhelming journey.
Yeah, for sure.
So we want to help you understand all the different options out there and figure out what might fit best for you.
Exactly. And, sometimes we realize that maybe our typical once-a-week therapy session isn't really cutting it anymore.
Yeah.
So what are some signs that might tell us we need something a little more intensive?
Well, imagine if you've been feeling really down for a while and it's starting to affect your everyday life. Like maybe you're finding it hard to get out of bed or go to work or even just take care of simple things like showering or eating.
Right, like it's really starting to take over.
Exactly. And, if you're having thoughts about hurting yourself or not wanting to be here anymore, that's like a huge red flag.
Yeah.
Don't hesitate. Reach out for help immediately.
Absolutely. Those thoughts are really serious and they need attention.
Right. And I've also heard that if you've been trying different medications and therapies for a while and you're still not feeling much relief, it might be a good time to consider other options.
Yeah, you got it. Think of it like this. If you had a broken leg, you wouldn't just keep walking on it and hoping it'd get better on its own. You'd go to the hospital and get a cast.
Right.
Mental health is the same way. Sometimes we need a little extra support to help us get back on track.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, I know some people might feel a little intimidated by the idea of inpatient care, like staying at a mental health facility. They might picture it as this scary or isolating place.
Right. There can be some misconceptions about it,
Yeah.
but it's really not like that at all. In fact, think of it more like a mental health retreat or like a reset button.
A reset button. I like that. Yeah. It's a place where you can really just focus on getting better. Without all the everyday stresses of life kind of getting in the way, you're surrounded by professionals who are there to help you feel better. And you'll be with other people who are going through similar things, which can be a huge source of support.
So it's kind of like this supportive community where everyone's focused on healing and recovering. And, I've even heard some stories about people who went to inpatient facilities and found it incredibly helpful. Like they were able to rebuild relationships and rediscover parts of themselves that they thought they had lost.
Exactly. It can be a really transformative experience for a lot of people.
That's so encouraging to hear. So let's say someone's listening and realizing they might need a higher level of care, maybe even inpatient. Talking to a loved one about that can be really awkward and difficult. Do you have any tips on how to approach those conversations?
You're right. It's not always easy, but there's this cool technique called motivational interviewing that can really help.
Motivational interviewing.
Yeah.
That sounds interesting.
Yeah.
What is that all about?
It's basically a way of talking to someone about change without being pushy or judgmental. It's like meeting them where they're at and gently guiding them towards making decisions that are good for them.
Okay, so it's not like lecturing them or making them feel bad.
Not at all. It's more about understanding their perspective and helping them see the benefits of getting that support.
So how does this work in practice? Give me an example.
Let's say your friend is struggling, but they're not even thinking about changing anything yet. That's called the pre-contemplation stage. Instead of jumping in and saying, you need to go to therapy, you could just casually share some information about different levels of care. Like, hey, I was reading about this place that helps people with depression. Sounds interesting, right?
Oh, so kind of like planting a seed without being pushy. I like that. What if they're actually starting to think about getting help? Like they're on the fence.
Yeah, that's the contemplation stage. You could offer to help them find some resources, like websites or brochures.
Okay. And what if they're ready to take action? Like they've decided they want a higher level of care.
Then you can be their cheerleader. Help them research facilities, schedule appointments, and even look into financial assistance options if cost is a concern.
That is so helpful.
Yeah.
It's like a roadmap for having those tricky conversations. So motivational interviewing is all about meeting people where they are and gently guiding them towards that positive change.
Exactly. It's about empowering them to make their own choices.
I love that. And it reminds me of something really important. Taking that first step towards getting help is a sign of strength, not weakness. It takes a lot of courage to say, hey, I need support.
Absolutely. It's like saying, I care about myself enough to get better.
So true. So let's say someone's listening and feeling totally overwhelmed by all this information, and they know they might need a higher level of care, but they don't even know where to start. What's like a good first step they can take today?
Well, they don't have to figure everything out at once. A great starting point is simply gathering information.
Okay. So what does that look like?
Well, they could do a quick Google search for mental health facilities in their area.
Simple yet effective.
Right. And they could also talk to their doctor about their options, or even reach out to a mental health hotline.
Those are all great ideas.
Oh.
And what if someone's worried about the cost of treatment?
Yeah, that's a valid concern. Mental health care can be expensive,
Right.
but there are ways to make it more affordable. First off, many insurance plans cover at least some mental health services. So definitely check with your provider to see what's covered under your specific plan.
That's a good point. And what if someone doesn't have insurance? Or their insurance doesn't cover enough?
There are still options. Some facilities offer sliding scale fees based on income, which means you pay what you can afford. And there are also nonprofit organizations and foundations that offer financial assistance for mental health treatment.
So don't let money be a barrier to getting the help you deserve. There are resources and people who can help you navigate the financial side of things.
Absolutely. And, thinking back to that toolbox idea, there are even some things you can add to your mental health toolbox that are totally free. Things like exercise, spending time in nature, or connecting with loved ones.
Oh, that's so true. Those everyday things can make a huge difference. It's like giving yourself a little mental health boost throughout the day.
Exactly. Small steps can lead to big changes.
I love that.
Hmm.
We've talked a lot about the practical side of things, but I think it's important to acknowledge the emotional side too. Seeking a higher level of care can be a really big decision, and it's totally normal to feel a mix of emotions about it.
Oh, absolutely. You might feel scared, uncertain, maybe even a little ashamed. All of those feelings are valid.
So what advice would you give to someone who's kind of wrestling with those emotions? Like, how do they even begin to process all of that?
First and foremost, remember that you're not alone. So many people have felt those same things, and they've come out stronger on the other side.
Yeah. It's comforting to know you're not the only one going through it. What else can help?
Don't be afraid to lean on your support system. Talk to friends, family therapists, support groups, anyone you trust. Sharing your feelings can really help you process them and feel less overwhelmed.
Sometimes just saying those words out loud can make a huge difference.
It really can. And remember, it's okay to feel that mix of emotions, Give yourself permission to feel whatever comes up without judgment.
That's so important, to be kind to yourself throughout this whole process.
Absolutely. It's a journey, not a race. And you deserve to be supported every step of the way.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this part of our deep dive. Are there any key takeaways you want to highlight for our listener before we move on?
Definitely. First, remember there's a whole spectrum of care available, from inpatient to PHPs to IOPs and beyond. It's not one size fits all. It's about finding what works for you.
And second,
seeking help is a sign of strength, not weakness. It takes courage to prioritize your mental health and reach out for support.
so true.
What else? You're not alone in this journey. There are so many resources and people who want to help you find that healing and recovery.
Beautifully said. Okay, ready for the last part of our deep dive?
Absolutely. We're going to hear some real-life stories of people who have navigated their mental health journeys in really inspiring ways.
I love that stories have this amazing power to remind us that hope is always possible.
Yeah, it's like, you're taking that step and saying, hey, I want to feel better.
Right. So building on that, we've talked about inpatient care. But I know there are other levels of support too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's not just like a one-size-fits-all situation.
Right.
There's a whole spectrum of care out there.
Yeah.
Think of it like a staircase.
Okay.
Inpatient care is up there, but there's some steps in between. That might be the perfect fit for some folks.
Oh, I like that analogy, a staircase.
Oh.
So what are some of those other steps?
Well, let's talk about partial hospitalization programs, or PHPs for short.
Okay, PHP's got it.
They're kind of like a step down from inpatient care.
Okay, so what's the difference?
So imagine you still need that intensive support, but you're not quite ready to be away from home 24/7.
Okay.
With a PHP, you go to the facility for several hours each day, you participate in therapy and activities, and then you get to go home at night.
So it's like a mental health day camp?
Exactly. You get that structured environment and support, but you also maintain some of your independence and routine.
That makes sense. And is there something even less intensive than that?
Yep. There's also something called intensive outpatient programs, or IOPs.
Okay, IOPs, got it.
These are designed for folks who are doing pretty well overall, but still need some extra support to stay on track.
Okay, so like a booster shot for your mental health.
Exactly. You usually go a few times a week, maybe for a couple hours each session. It's a great option for people who are transitioning out of a higher level of care, like inpatient or PHP, or for those who just need a little extra help navigating life's challenges.
Wow, there are so many options. It's amazing to see all the different ways that people can get support. It's like having a mental health toolbox with all these different tools you can choose from.
I love that analogy. And the best part is, you can work with a mental health professional to figure out which tools work best for you.
Because everyone's journey is different, right? What works for me might not work for you, and that's okay.
Exactly. It's about finding what fits your unique needs and situation. Now, I know a lot of people might be thinking, oh, okay, this all sounds great, but what about the cost?
Yeah, cost is a real concern. Mental health care can be expensive.
It definitely can be. But there are ways to make it more affordable. First off, many insurance plans cover at least some mental health services, so definitely check with your provider to see what's covered under your specific plan.
Good point. What if someone doesn't have insurance, or their insurance doesn't cover enough?
There are still options. Some facilities offer sliding scale fees based on income, which means you pay what you can afford. And there are also nonprofit organizations and foundations that offer financial assistance for mental health treatment.
So don't let money be a barrier to getting the help you deserve.
Yeah.
There are resources and people out there who can help you navigate the financial side of things.
Absolutely. And thinking back to that toolbox idea, there are even some things you can add to your mental health toolbox that are totally free. Things like exercise, spending time in nature, or connecting with loved ones.
Oh, that's so true. Those everyday things can make a huge difference. It's like giving yourself a little mental health boost throughout the day.
Exactly. Small steps can lead to big changes.
I love that. We've talked a lot about the practical side of things, but I think it's also important to acknowledge the emotional side too. Seeking a higher level of care can be a really big decision.
Yeah.
And it's totally normal to feel a mix of emotions about it.
Oh, absolutely. You might feel scared, uncertain, maybe even a little ashamed. All of those feelings are valid.
So what advice would you give to someone who's kind of wrestling with those emotions? Like, how do they even begin to process all that?
First and foremost, remember that you're not alone. So many people have felt those same things, and they've come out stronger on the other side.
It's comforting to know that you're not the only one going through this. What else can help?
Don't be afraid to lean on your support system. Talk to friends, family therapists, support groups, anyone you trust. Sharing your feelings can really help you process them and feel less overwhelmed.
Sometimes just saying the words out loud can make a huge difference.
It really can. And remember, it's okay to feel that mix of emotions. Give yourself permission to feel whatever comes up without judgment.
I think that's so important. To be kind to yourself throughout this whole process.
Absolutely. It's a journey, not a race. You deserve to be supported every step of the way.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this part of our deep dive.
Yeah.
Any key takeaways you want to highlight for our listeners before we move on?
Definitely. First, remember, there's a whole spectrum of care available, from inpatient to PHPs to IOPs and beyond. It's not one size fits all. It's about finding what works for you.
And second?
Seeking help is a sign of strength, not weakness. It takes courage to prioritize your mental health and to reach out for support.
So true. What else?
You're not alone in this journey. There are so many resources and people who want to help you find that healing and recovery.
Beautifully said. Okay, ready for the last part of our deep dive?
Absolutely. We're going to hear some real-life stories of people who have navigated their mental health journeys in really inspiring ways.
I love that stories have this amazing power to remind us that hope is always possible. All right, welcome back. We're wrapping up our deep dive into finding the right level of care for depression. And I'm super excited for this last part. We're going to shift gears a little bit and hear some inspiring stories of people who found the support they needed and are now thriving.
I love this part. Stories have a way of reminding us that we're not alone and that recovery is totally possible.
It's like that little beacon of hope.
Totally.
So let's jump into our first story. This one's about a woman named Sarah who found healing through inpatient care.
Sarah had been battling depression for years, trying different medications and therapy approaches. But nothing really seemed to stick. She just felt lost and hopeless, like she was stuck in a dark tunnel with no end in sight.
It's heartbreaking to imagine feeling that way.
Yeah, it really is. Eventually, Sarah realized she couldn't keep going on her own. She was having thoughts of suicide and knew she needed a higher level of care.
That must have been a really tough decision to check herself into an inpatient facility.
It was. But it ended up being a turning point in her life. Sarah describes the facility as like a safe and nurturing space where she could finally focus on her well-being without all those distractions of everyday life. She participated in group therapy, individual therapy, and even art therapy, which she found incredibly therapeutic.
art therapy.
Hmm.
I've always been curious about that. How does that work?
Well, it's a way of expressing emotions and processing experiences through art. It can be really helpful for people who find it difficult to put their feelings into words.
Right.
For Sarah, it was like unlocking a hidden part of herself.
Oh, that's so cool. It sounds like inpatient care really gave her the tools and the space she needed to start rebuilding her life.
It absolutely did. She learned coping skills, developed healthy routines, and connected with other people who understood her struggles. Most importantly, she rediscovered that sense of hope that she thought she had lost forever.
Wow, that is so inspiring. What a beautiful reminder that even in our darkest moments, healing and hope are always possible.
Okay.
Ready for our next story?
Bring it on. This one highlights the power of community and connection. It's about a guy named David who found strength in a peer support group.
Oh, peer support groups are amazing.
Yeah.
They offer a space for people to share their experiences, support each other, and just feel less alone. I bet that was huge for David.
It was. At first, he was a little hesitant to join a group. He worried about being judged or feeling vulnerable, but he finally took the plunge, and he was blown away by the sense of belonging and understanding he found there.
It's amazing how sharing our experiences with others can help us feel less alone and more empowered.
Absolutely. The group became like a safe haven for David, a place where he could talk about his challenges, celebrate his victories, and learn from others who had walked a similar path. You know, he realized that he wasn't the only one struggling, and that was incredibly validating.
It's like that saying, a burden shared is a burden halved.
Exactly. The group gave David the courage to keep pushing forward, even when things got tough. He knew he had a whole team of people in his corner cheering him on.
I love that. Okay, ready for our final story. This one is about a woman named Maria who discovered the power of finding what works best for her.
Maria's story is a great reminder that there are so many paths to healing, and what works for one person might not work for another. It's all about finding what resonates with you.
So true. What was Maria's path?
Well, Maria had tried traditional therapy, but she felt like she needed something more, something that spoke to her on like a deeper level.
Yeah.
That's when she stumbled upon mindfulness meditation.
Mindfulness is so powerful. It's all about being present in the moment and noticing your thoughts and feelings without judgment. I can see how that could be really helpful for managing depression.
Exactly. Maria started with just a few minutes of meditation each day, focusing on her breath and observing her thoughts. And she was amazed by how much it calmed her mind and reduced her anxiety. She also started incorporating gentle movement into her routine, things like yoga and nature walks.
I love that. It's like finding these little pockets of peace and joy throughout the day.
It really is. Maria's story teaches us that it's okay to experiment and explore different approaches until you find what clicks for you. There's no right or wrong way to heal. It's all about finding what feels authentic and supportive.
These stories have been so inspiring. They're a beautiful reminder that recovery is possible even when things feel really tough.
Any final thoughts you want to share with our listeners before we wrap things up?
Absolutely. You know, if you're struggling, please know that you are not alone. There are people who care about you and want to help. Reach out to a friend, a family member, a therapist, or a support group. And be kind to yourself. Recovery is a journey, not a destination. And every step you take towards healing is a victory worth celebrating.
Beautifully said. And remember, there's a whole world of support out there waiting for you. You deserve to find the care that helps you thrive. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.